Right. Afternoon, everyone. For those that are here, thank you so much for attending. I know that it is a public holiday and it's a public holiday of significance. Unfortunately, we have been pushed into this situation due to other circumstances. What I've done is a review of past papers. I cannot promise you what is in the paper because I think you guys know that I haven't got a cooking clue of what to expect and what might be in the paper. So I've looked at past papers and picked up what I think are the important bits and pieces from those papers. So in terms of everything here, it is the blend between the theory, and you have to give the theory, and the application and interpretation, etc. So everything should be based around a case study, although I saw in the test that they had changed it slightly and had adjusted that point of view slightly. So I am happy to find some old papers to share that with you guys for you to look at. But what we're doing here is the first stuff you study and the last stuff you study based on patterns and trends. So I'm going to set up a complete separate set of slides that I'll create as we go through it. So I think let's see if there's anything here. Yeah, so this first learning unit, again, you still need to study absolutely everything, but I'm not too concerned about anything here that would concern me right now, although you have to still study it. In terms of the second learning unit, and I'm talking about part A, I think there are a couple of things that we need to remember. So they love giving a description, and you have to, based on this sort of Bill of Rights, find where the organization has transgressed the rules in terms of this Bill of Rights. So in terms of the Constitution, we know that it is the highest law in the country. Let me just do this as a separate thing. I'm just going to call it exam slides, INRL 6211, bugger off, 6211 exam slides. Right, so the first one is this one here. Please have a glance at that. Indirect discrimination, right to privacy, freedom of speech, etc. I think we all know what they mean. You would have done this at school multiple occasions. This is a fairly important one. If the exam is exactly as it should be, and remember, please look at that set, that booklet of legislation, so in your mind, so you can clarify what legislation goes where. Please remember to do that. That is absolutely essential, that you have it clear in your mind what legislation is where. So in terms of this, be able to apply this to a case study, very important. So that is provided for you, so you don't have to study it because it should be in the legislation pack. The second part that is important in terms of this, guys, is they love asking this one here. Right. So in terms of the common law duties and responsibilities, so in terms of that, they will look at it from the employer's perspective. Here are the expectations that the employer would meet. So again, you'd get a description and you would have to see whether the person's being paid, whether there are health and safety work issues being attended to, provided with work. So sometimes what happens, an employer hires somebody and they then don't give the person work, and that person's salary is dependent on receiving work. And they can't make you do work junior in status. So you can't tell an accountant to clean an office, for example. And then also you can't rent your employee out to someone else in this instance. So that's an important slide. That the second one, what the employee is expected to do, right? Work to their ability to carry out instructions, and it's about honesty and theft and avoiding those kinds of things, and to not set up competition. So to only work for the employer during the work day. So these two are important. Again, based around a description that will be given. I'm going to just move them in here as well. I'm just calling it, I'll stick it in there. Hold on a second. Let me just save it as our exam slides. Sorry about that. Okay, so we'll have a sense of that. Please be able to answer that one in particular. So the duties and responsibilities. You also know that the duties of one essentially become the rights of the other. So in terms of learning unit 2, please study that stuff off by heart. Okay, so make sure that you've got it in your head. The rights and responsibilities. Um, Again, anything can be there. They sometimes ask about the notice period, so please make sure that you have a glance at the notice period. In terms of law, if you've worked less than 6 months, it's 1 week. Between 6 and 12 months, it is 2 weeks. And then if you've worked for a year or more, it is 4 weeks. It is 4 weeks. So nothing dramatic in terms of that one. Also, it should be in the legislation that is provided. So there shouldn't be a problem with that one whatsoever. Don't have much else as a headache here that I'm concerned about. Again, these would, wherever it comes from a piece of legislation, they will give you that legislation. Please make sure that in terms of that legislation booklet, and does everyone know what I'm talking about in terms of the legislation booklet? Sorry, guys, is my mic not working? Who doesn't know what the legislation booklet is about?
Can you please didn't explain it, sir?
Jangas, I'm going to stand on things you don't like being stood on. You were supposed to look at it for the exam, for the test, boyo. It's this thing. No, man, but surely you're kidding. And I don't think you're the only one, because I think everyone doesn't know. The piece of legislation booklet that you should have had looked at prior to the test.
Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, I remember.
Have you
Sorry, sir.
got that?
Apologies.
Okay, boy.
Apologies. Apologies.
No, oh boy, don't worry. At least you're talking. That I appreciate that. Okay, so hold on a second. I'll show it to the others, because let's be honest, I don't think they know. Right, so it's this one, just in case people don't know. It's just going to take a moment for me to get there. My apologies. I can't remember which is the most complete one. Um, I'm trying to remember which is the most complete one. Let's just see if it's this one. Okay, I'm hoping that it's this one. So it's this stuff here, guys. This the legislation that you provided with, strikes and lockouts, um, your dismissals. Those ones are there. There should also be, if they have a question on the Basic Conditions of Employment Act Code of Good Practice, if there's something on the Basic Conditions of Employment Act, they should have that included as well, and whatever other legislation stuff is there. So does that make sense now when I say the legislation booklet?
Yes, it does, sir.
Yes,
Okay.
sir, it does make sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so do I need to re-upload that one?
The
You
last
sent it
time
on
I
the
checked,
group,
it
so
was
we
in
have
the
it.
group.
Yeah, it's on the group.
It's on the group. Okay, can somebody just reshare it on the group for me? Thank you so much. Somebody will reshare it on the group. That's brilliant. Thank you. Okay, so nothing too dramatic in my mind there. So if we look at the other bits and pieces that we are concerned about, I've tried to make a list. Yeah. So there, and I'm going to try and do it in some logical order. The next main one, to just go here, extracts from legislation, not that. The next main one, Labour Relations Act. I don't think that I would be too concerned about too many things. Again, you need to know this, but yeah, the one that I would want you to remember is the difference between majority representation and sufficient representation. So majority representation is where a trade union has more than 50% of the employees as members. So if it's always 50% plus one. Sufficient representation is when they have approximately 30%. You need to put that into your brain. Remember those two. Sufficient representation, 30%. Majority representation, then obviously 50% plus one. So if you've got 600, it would be 300 plus one. 301 would give you majority representation. Those two numbers are essential. Those relate to these organizational rights. So I'll put this in as well. So again, this is from the legislation, so you should be given this. So you don't need to study it. Maybe the best is just to make a note of this, guys. So in terms of organizational rights, and again, this is in the legislation, when you have majority representation, it means all the rights will apply to you. Okay, so when you have majority representation, all the rights will apply to you. When you have sufficient representation, which is approximately 30%, the following rights will apply to you. Right, so in terms of that, the rights that will apply to you if you have sufficient representation will be access to the workplace, okay, will be the deduction of union dues. Now here you'll see this is when it's a majority trade union, so you won't have that one. You will have leave for union activities, but you won't have the disclosure of information. So please remember that in your mind, okay? Please also look at these collective agreements. Collective agreements are specifically, and I would suggest you take notes when you watch the recording, when essentially you have gone through this process of negotiation and bargaining, the collective agreements, the rules of the relationship. There are two collective agreements that look out in terms of making sure that people join a trade union and get rid of the term is free riders. A free rider is somebody who benefits from the trade union's operations but doesn't contribute to their costs. Sorry, I'm having coffee. The first one is an agency shop agreement, where if there's one of those, you don't have to be a member of a trade union, but if you're not a member of a trade union, you would have to contribute to the majority trade union. Closed shop agreements is that if you work in a closed shop agreement organization, you don't have a choice but to be a member of one, of the trade unions, and you can normally form that when there is some sort of 2/3 majority vote on that ballot on that. So please remember those details as well, and remember how those, remember those details. You have to study everything, guys. I can't emphasize that enough. You have to study absolutely everything. In terms of strikes and lockouts, there are a couple of ones. So again, here we're looking at this. So all of this is from the packet of legislation. Just remember, there are a couple of things. You need to know the process to make sure that you have a legal strike or a legal lockout. So normally it is a dispute. And then once that dispute has been declared with the CCMA, you will get a certificate to say it remains unresolved, or you will have 30 days to resolve it between the trade union and the employer. And before you can go out to strike, once either the certificate or the 30 days have passed, you would then be given 48 hours. You have to give 48 hours notice. Just remember, you'll see in your package as well that it's 7 days. There are a couple of these that are important, and you need to know each of these. So again, this is from the legislation. So you just need to read the case study and see whether it applies. So there are two kinds of additional strikes. Let me put it to you that way. The original strike, secondary strikes, which are sympathy strikes. So the original strike, it's when Toyota is on strike or their trade union, and Dunlop workers want to go out to strike in solidarity with the Toyota workers. So the original strike has to be procedural, and you have to give 7 days notice. The truth is, it's often interdicted, but if you can find a reasonable connect between the two. If it is an illegal strike, you'll see the term wildcat strike. Please make sure also, guys, now we'll get it to when we look at those slides. Illegal strike, normally you would get an interdict. You would give 48 hours notice. It depends on others' situation, and if people don't return, you can then start dismissing, and then obviously there can also be claims against the trade union. So please remember that in terms of strike action. I'm not too worried about this stuff here. Okay, all of these are extracts. I'm going to deal with the dismissal as a separate chapter, and we'll go through that. So the next major one that I am concerned about is please be able to interpret the Basic Conditions of Employment Act stuff. Is the Basic Conditions of Employment Act in here? Where did I put that? Okay, so the Basic Conditions of Employment. Again, guys, this one is important. Okay, this one is important. They love asking this one. So the difference between what an employee is and an independent contractor. So remember, if you're an employee, you have got access to absolutely everything, all the rights in the legislation. There are different ways of interpreting who an employee is, but generally you would have these options. So depending on the test that they ask you to use, and again, this is from the legislation, so there shouldn't be too much of a problem with that, but be able to, when you read something in terms of the difference between an employee and an independent contractor, please just make sure that if any of these, so generally the test we use is those. So what they would do in the exam, they would describe how the person works, when the person works, etc. And that would make the person employee. Often independent contractors are people like those that essentially will come in to do a specific service. A plumber comes to your house to install a toilet. That is an independent contractor. The person who works for the plumber who installs a toilet, that relationship has nothing to do with the homeowner, but that employee is likely to be then have a contract with the person who came to do the work. So please remember, an independent contractor, it is specific to a service. You hire somebody to come in to, I don't know, to build a brick wall. That is an independent contractor. They're not part of your organization. And once the thing is done, they would normally leave. But you'll see what makes an employee are these things. So you will be on the lookout for whether those kinds of things are present. This is NB. It appears all the time. It's only going to be 10 marks in the exam, but 10 out of 100 is a hell of a lot. Okay. Right. What else am I concerned about? Let's look at this stuff. Now I'm looking at you. I'll come back to that one. Where is Learning Unit 4? Learning Unit 4 will have a lot of questions in general. Okay. So I don't know whether there will be stuff on grievances, but remember, grievances when an employee is unhappy and they want to raise it, raise attention to that with the employer. So please just remember, in terms of the grievance process, just have a glance at this. There's not too much here that I'm concerned about. Just in case, have a glance at this. They love asking this one. And generally, yeah. Okay, so often it's this kind of process. So have a glance at grievances. Just have a good study of that. I can't promise that it's going to be there, but it's normally those ones that they're concerned about. But it's the process that you go through when somebody raises a grievance. I'll stick those in there. Right, so Learning Unit 4 is an important learning unit. The key thing in Learning Unit 4 that often makes an appearance would be your dismissals. So, yeah, you can read through and study the disciplinary stuff, but it generally is with your dismissals that you have to be aware of, okay? In terms of the dismissal processes, you need to be able to identify the kind of dismissal. So the kind of dismissal, and guys, please make notes of these, create your own notes, create your own sub-notes in terms of these hints. The kinds of dismissals can either be dismissal for misconduct, where you've broken a rule, fraud, theft, violence, those kinds of things, or it is an incapacity dismissal. Incapacity has two elements to it. Poor performance, where the person is not delivering in terms of quantity and quality of work, or it is a dismissal for ill health, so where a person's simply too ill to continue working. And then operational requirements is where a person's dismissed for, or it's a retrenchment. So it is, it is a retrenchment. Key here, guys, in terms of dismissal. So again, these are from your legislation pack, but be able to interpret this, okay? So it will give you a discussion, and then you would have to decide the kind of dismissal. This is an important one here, in that you have got only those three options that are available. Again, you should know this by now. We had discussed it in class, not that people were attending, I'm going to say at all, but that one is fairly important, okay? The other bit in terms of the dismissals that we are concerned about will be the specifics around the dismissals, okay? So in terms of dismissals, yeah, we'll talk about that. I should have done that earlier. So in terms of fixed term contracts, okay, there are a couple there. So please remember that, again, this is from there, but understand that there could be dismissals when a person's on a fixed term contract, but if there's this expectation of continued employment, so you need to write that down, you have to have valid reasons to dismiss. Yeah, automatic termination, all of these will be in the legislation pack. And then, yeah, these are the automatically unfair dismissals. So these are grossly unfair. You can see where they are there. That will be in the legislation pack as well. The important ones, guys, is this. Okay, so these are again from the legislation pack, but you must be able to read the case study and then be able to decide what form of dismissal it is. So is it poor performance? So it's incapacity, poor performance. For you to legally dismiss somebody, you need to do that. You need to show that you've told them what the standards are, that you've told them that their performance is not satisfactory, that you have to give them appropriate advice, guidance, education, training, etc. So all of these. So you'd have to read to see whether any of these elements were done. Again, this is from the package, but I'm going to put it into yours as well. If a person's gone beyond probation, yeah, again, have you communicated the performance standards? Have you provided evaluation? Have you been given the necessary? And you have to prove that you've done each of these to ensure a legal definition. This is again from the legislation, so it should be in the pack. Okay. If it's not in the pack, we'll make a noise because they can't keep messing that up. Yeah, and then dismissals. And then disputes. So generally, if there's been a dismissal, you would have 30 days to raise a dispute, to declare a dispute. You would normally go to the CCMA where they'll do conciliation, mediation, or conciliation or mediation, and then to arbitration. If it's an automatically unfair dismissal, you would again raise a dispute, but that would then go to, after conciliation stroke mediation, it would go to the Labour Court for adjudication. Okay. Unfair labor practices. Oh, I hope they don't ask this. Unfair labor practices are those where you don't dismiss the person, but you put a person in a position that is less favorable than what they should be. Okay. So this is when you've not promoted, where you've unfairly demoted, where you keep putting a person on probation when the person's been hired as part of one of those Skills Development Act contracts where you hire people to train them up, and if you've not given training. Unfair suspension, and remember, before you can suspend an employee, you have to give them a chance to state their case. And you can see some of the others here. And then, so yeah, disputes. So if it's an unfair labor practice dispute, you have 90 days, because sometimes people don't check their pay slips. They don't realize that they've been disadvantaged. And again, it would go to the CCMA. Okay. I need to spend a little bit more time on something. Okay. Sorry, guys. It's all over the place, but we'll have an idea. The unfair dismissals are important. Okay. It's likely that you'll have an unfair dismissal in every single one of your questions. Where is that? So please be able to look at the unfair dismissals. Sorry, guys, I need to just find the slides that relate to it. I need to provide a bit more on that. Unfair dismissals. Yeah, employment equity, that you could have something on discrimination, etc. Okay, in terms of negotiation, just be able to, I don't think there's anything dramatic here. you know, there's always a short question on conflict and those kinds of things. So you need to look at it. There are questions on power. You need to look at that as well. That won't be in there. Yeah, the negotiation you have to work through, guys. It could literally be any of those. Okay, could be any of those. The one thing I want to NB here is this here in terms of dispute resolution, the process. This is NB. They love asking this, the difference between a dispute of right and a dispute of interest. So just remember, a dispute of right is where the employer or the employee, but generally it is the employer, has disadvantaged or unfairly dismissed the employee. So you can only legally dismiss for certain things, but the employee here has not adhered to this dismissal requirements. So we have an issue in terms of that. The two forms of disputes, yeah, this is important. The two forms of disputes of right. So an existing rule, whether it's part of an employment contract, whether it's part of a piece of legislation, and on the one side of this party has broken that rule. They've not adhered to the legislation. Disputes of interest, and the best way to think of disputes of interest are about creating new rules. So this is where there is no piece of legislation, there is no contract inclusion, and you have to find some sort of, you know, new set of guidelines, and the employer, for example, refuses to negotiate. Please, in your mind, know the difference between those two, dispute of interest and a dispute of right. Sure, guys. Okay, that is an NB for me. The other NB, and if I've already discussed it, I apologize, because, you know, the slides tend to... Okay, this is the full industrial action one, strikes and lockouts. Okay, this is the full discussion. So please study from this one. Now, again, this is from the legislation. Know what a secondary strike is, a sympathy strike. This is Learning Unit 9, guys. These are those, the process when there is an illegal strike. A go slow is where people essentially just slow down. This you need to know, because that will not be in the legislation pack. So this is NB, because this will not be in the legislation pack. Just remember the difference between a go slow, where you deliberately slow down the pace of work to rule, where you work to the narrowest interpretation of your job description, and then work sit-ins is where you just occupy space, where people can't walk through, trucks can't get in and out, etc. Be able to identify those as well. And then in terms of making sure that a strike is legal, so whenever you see the term protected strike, you will check what is legal, what is not legal. So there has to be a process that is followed in terms of legal strikes, okay? As the right to strike has to be a dispute, has to have a certificate, or 30 days will pass, 48 hours notice, but if it's a government thing, 7 days notice. So you'll be able to take this, because this is from the legislation, and just tick box it in terms of the description in the exam, okay? I don't know if they'll ask limitations on, I don't know, essential and maintenance services. All the definitions are there. Essential service, if that service is interrupted, it will cause harm to the population, etc., etc. Maintenance is if there's an interruption in terms of the service, it could destroy parts of a particular plant. Lockouts is where the employer locks out. Picketing, just know what picketing is. You've all seen it before. Remember, there are rules around picketing. Again, why do we have picketing? That is the reason. So please just make sure in terms of picketing that if there is one, that you look at the legislation pack. But there are a variety of reasons why we picket. It's often to just sway the public's mind in our direction. There are lots of rules around picketing. You can't disrupt the flow of things. It's a peaceful protest, essentially. Right. I'm trying to see, I did yeah, the one thing that maybe I also need to shove in here, guys, is it this guy? I don't know if this will make an appearance, but there are two forms of negotiation or bargaining styles. Hold on. Whether this will make an appearance, I'm not sure. Sorry, hold on. I don't know where the bargaining styles are. This is irritating me now. Yeah, there's some more definitions around dispute of interest. Hold on a second. Let me just go back to Learning Unit 1. I'll put this in. This is just one that's popped into my head now. I'm not sure. Yeah, I'll skip across a lot of this stuff if I were you. Okay. Yeah, unitary and I don't know whether this is no. Yeah, hold on a second. Sorry, guys. Yeah, look at integrative versus distributive bargaining for me as well. Okay. So it's integrative bargaining about win-win outcomes. People see each other as partners in the bargaining process. Just be aware of that one for me. Also be aware of distributive bargaining, which is people, us and them, management, us, employees, them, as well as the other way around. Maybe have a glass. Yeah, distributive bargaining, have a glance at that one. Just this is us and again, the us and them approach to bargaining. Where is that exam? Sorry, guys, it's very difficult because I can't, I have no specific answers here. So it's very difficult to know what to put where. The one thing that let me just look at my notes here. As I think I've done absolutely everything. The one thing I just want to spend a bit more time on is just for our own sake, because this is going to be a majority of your questions, and it is going to be on dismissals, okay? The different forms of dismissals. So let me just get that set of slides up, and because for me that is important that you know the difference. This is going to be a big part of this, okay? The other thing, guys, in terms of dismissing people during industrial action, you can dismiss somebody if they cause damage, if they intimidate, if they're violent during industrial action. Please remember that one as well. So just bear that in mind. Yeah, so that's the dismissal of strikers. Where is that? I'm trying to get the best set of slides for this, guys. So dismissals. So dismissal, let's just find the right one. Yeah, unfair dismissals. So these are the important ones, guys. You need to make sure in your mind that you know the difference between a dismissal for misconduct, a dismissal for ill health, a dismissal for performance, and an operational requirements dismissal. You have to know those out of your head, guys. Trying to think which is the best place to look for that. Okay, I wonder if we don't just look in here. So this is in that package. The key thing in terms of dismissals, guys, is that there is a code of good practice. So you need to, when it's about dismissal, you will have to go to the code of practice that relates to that. Okay. So here is the definition. These are all given to you in the exam, okay? Those are all given to you, the different forms of dismissal, okay? This is also given to you in exam. Who is an employee? Just remember to be able to tell the difference between that and an independent contract. It's only going to be about 10 in the exam. This is the one that you default to in terms of the exam for dismissals. You have to get this clear in your head, guys, in terms of the dismissal. So you have to be able to read and immediately know the form of dismissal. Okay. So in terms of dismissals, misconduct, when you break rules, when you're violent, when there's theft, when there's fraud, when there's damage to property, I think you know what that would be. Okay. So every dismissal has to be fair, both procedurally and substantively. Procedural fairness, and you need to create a separate set of notes to get this into your head, is about the process you follow to dismiss. Each of these different forms of dismissal, whether it's misconduct, whether it's incapacity, either of the incapacities, and whether it is operational requirements, will have their own rules in terms of procedure and in terms of substance. So procedural fairness, generally, if there is a dismissal for misconduct, there it is. Okay, so you find here dismissals for misconduct, and there is the procedure. What happens generally is that the examiner would have given you a procedure, and you need to compare that against this. In terms of dismissals during industrial action, they will be a question on this because there's always one. What happens if somebody sets cars on fire or misbehaves during industrial action? Please remember that this is the section that you default to. Now, you also have to make sure that you understand the difference between this as the procedure for misconduct and here the guidelines. So the moment they say guidelines, you will default to this part. Okay, has the person broken a rule? Okay, so there's a disciplinary code, the person's broken rule, or it's obvious that the person's broken a rule. If the person's broken a rule, is it valid or reasonable? It's valid and reasonable to expect someone not to steal. Is the person aware, or is it logical that you should know not to set cars on fire? Has it been consistently applied? Essentially, it doesn't matter who broke the rule, they will all be treated the same way. And then you have to say, depending on what the reason was it an appropriate sanction? So the guidelines and the procedures are two separate things. Get them clear in your mind. Poor performance, so the person's not keeping up to poor performance. This is important. So the description there again, and then, yeah, during probation, that period where you prove yourself, and generally you will see the discussion, and then you'll go here in terms of the guidelines, evaluation, instruction. So please make sure that you default to the right section, okay? In terms of poor performance, again, they're the guidelines are my apologies. Have you done that? So it will be a description, and you'll have to see whether the person's not met the standard, whether the person was given, is aware of the standard, or could reasonably be expected to be aware, was given those opportunities to improve, and. So there it is. Incapacity, ill health is where the person's simply too ill to continue working. A wonderful description there. Here is what you need to do: is if it goes to the labor court, to the CCMA, you would have to prove that the person's not capable, that the person is not going to ever be capable. We can't change the circumstances, but you need to see in the case study, because the description would suggest those. Those are hell of important, guys. I cannot emphasize it. Again, in terms of the Basic Condition Employment Act, they will give you an extract from a contract, and based on that extract, you would then look at, and they'll talk about hours of work, etc. You need to be able to compare. This is hell of important. This dismissal one and the strike action one is hell of important. What else have I missed out on? Guys, I can just tell you that I do not know the papers, okay? Oh, the other one that I need to, this one they love asking. My apologies. This one they love asking. It should again be in your, legislation pack. When is it appropriate to extend somebody's contract? So you know that they have fixed term contracts. So a fixed term contract is for a fixed period or for completing a specific project. This is important. They love asking this. When is it appropriate to extend a fixed term contract? This is hell of important. Okay, in terms of the fixed term contract, I'm just going to go to the legislation pack. You can find it in your slides. I think it's the first learning unit. You can look for it. Okay. Where is it? Control F, FIXED, fixed. Okay, so it's not in this pack that I've opened, but I don't think this is the same pack that you have. Okay, it should be in the legislation. Hold on, where is it now? Irritated with myself. Sorry, guys. Just open this one. Control F. Okay, so there are please know the different type of contracts. This is NB. Okay, this is NB, the different types of contracts, but the fixed term one is the most important out of those for me. Fixed term contract, you can see there, specific event for a specific period, a fixed date where it ends. Okay, rule in terms of fixed term contracts, only 3 months. Okay, there are a couple of rules, must be in writing, but you can extend, and this is from the legislation, so that should be in the pack if this is a question. This is important. If he's replacing somebody who's on maternity leave, which is 4 months, if there's a spike in work, if it's a student that's part of a learnership, non-citizenships, you can see those, okay, guys, if you want to keep somebody beyond 65. Okay, I'm going to put that in, although it is from the legislation. This is hell of important. I hope that you guys can listen to all of this in the slides. You have to stop and play and stop the recording, so that when you do this, you're able to actually just spend a bit of time on each of the key things. Sorry, this is now having a moment here. Sorry, this is just frozen, guys. Okay, so this guy has now decided to stop working. Hold on a second. Let me just try and get the rest of this closed, and maybe this idiot will stop its nonsense. Other than that, guys, there isn't anything I can say. I will upload this immediately onto the group, just to reiterate on how to use this. Play the recording, take the first bit, study it. Play the next bit, study it. What I'll do is I'll put it on my YouTube channel, and I'll share it with you on the YouTube channel. You have to. This is the stuff that you do first and last. You have to study everything. Please familiarize yourself with that exam booklet. Can somebody please reshare it? I'm sure somebody would have already done that for us, that you know where things are in that exam booklet. Right, if there are no questions, I'm going to stop there. I don't know if this has made any difference whatsoever, but I really